They're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Well, that was yesterday, and this is today. Tonight, former President Donald Trump certainly leaning into Biden's comments at his rally right now in Wisconsin, where he arrived in a Trump garbage truck. That's where we start tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. This is Stay Tuned Now. Look, this is an image that will have so many potential voters doing a double take, wondering if this is an AI deepfake or if this is actually former President Donald Trump rolling up in a MAGA garbage truck. But here it is. A moment showing the day and age we live in. Donald Trump surprising the press corps by rolling in a garbage truck that was part of his official motorcade, fully capitalizing on that gaffe made yesterday by current President Joe Biden. As he said, the only garbage I see floating out there are his supporters. All of this starting when a comedian at a Trump rally made a racist joke about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. Trump was asked about that comedian's comments while in his garbage truck today.
I think that the comment made by really both of them, because there are really two of them, about being garbage, maybe 250 million people, they shouldn't be talking. That's like deplorable for Hillary. This is the deplorable for Hillary.
So Vice President Kamala Harris also seemed to take issue with Biden's gaffe, while also seeming to insinuate that he didn't mean what he said.
First of all, he clarified his comments, but let me be clear, I strongly disagree with any criticism of people based on who they vote for.
They've treated you like garbage. You know what? The truth is they've treated our whole country like garbage, whether they meant to or not, because they're grossly incompetent people.
All right, fast forward to right now. Trump is hosting a rally in Green Bay, Wisconsin, still in that reflective vest with former Packers quarterback Brett Favre. NBC correspondent Garrett Hake joins us now from the Green Bay. Garrett, the garbage truck moment. I mean, can you describe what that was like? Did it seem to catch a lot of people by surprise?
Well, Gadi, it happened on the tarmac when his plane landed here in Green Bay, so folks only saw it on video, but the campaign did very quickly turn around a video clip of that to show to the rally crowd here in Green Bay. The Trump campaign official told us this morning that they were going to try to make this story, this comment from President Biden, block out the sun today. They really wanted to try to keep the news media focused on it. That's why you see this stunt today. I did not have sanitation worker cosplay on my campaign final week bingo card. I don't think you did either, Gadi. But that's where we are right now. The Trump campaign has seamlessly worked this concept into the former president's remarks and that of almost every single one of his pre-programmed speakers here tonight. They're hoping to get his supporters to feel as victimized as Trump often does, fired up, ready not just to go vote, but to volunteer, door knock, and close this thing out, they hope, in the next 6 days.
All right, so Trump did win Green Bay back in 2020, but Biden ended up winning all of Wisconsin. How is Trump doing out there right now? And, you know, Brett Favre alongside him. Can Favre and the dump truck or the garbage truck and that vest possibly flip Wisconsin here?
Look, Gadi, we're talking about a state where the margins are going to be so close. Every single vote could matter, and every single gimmick might help or hurt. It's just impossible to say right now. I was just talking to a Trump campaign official who told me they are cautiously optimistic about all the battleground states, but really most nervous, to the degree they ever admit that they're nervous, about these three blue wall states in the upper Midwest. And Wisconsin was the closest of the three of them last time in terms of sheer numbers. You got to think if there's one that they would feel best about flipping, it's Wisconsin, but it's also the smallest of the three in terms of electoral votes. It's probably not enough on its own for a battleground flip for Donald Trump. So I suspect we will see him here. In fact, we know we're going to see him here at least one more time on Friday, campaigning in Milwaukee. Whether they add on top of that in the race's final days, I think will tell us a little bit more about how they feel about the Badger State in particular.
And Garrett, a lot of times in like the home stretch, you don't really see a lot of movement other than, them trying to stay on message. Maybe there will be a stunt. Maybe there will be opposition research that drops. Maybe they're just hoping for each other to make a mistake. And yet we don't hear about a lot of policy changes. But we are learning more about this new deportation tactic that Trump is thinking about. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Donald Trump has made this idea of doing the largest mass deportation of undocumented immigrants in American history a core part of his campaign promises. What he has never fully explained is how he would pay for it and how exactly he would enact it with Border Patrol and ICE and local police already kind of strained to the max. What Julia Ainsley and I and some of our other colleagues have been able to report out is one of the things they are discussing in Trump world is withholding DOJ grants to local police departments unless they change away from sanctuary city or sanctuary state status, essentially saying, we need you to help us with this policy, and if you're not willing to do it on your own, we might take away money you need elsewhere. So there are police departments already around the country who engage in more immigration enforcement than do others. North Carolina, for example, has a lot of local sheriff's departments to engage in immigration enforcement. This is a sort of a hammer and anvil tactic for the Trump campaign to force otherwise non-compliant police departments to do so or face potentially pretty devastating budget cuts.
And again, Garrett, the images behind you are kind of remarkable. I mean, you've heard the stump speeches over and over and over again. Are you hearing anything different there tonight?
Well, look, the top was certainly new, Gadi. All focused on this garbage comment. The former president obviously out here in this sanitation worker's vest trying to joke about how he thinks it makes him look slimmer, telling a story about how difficult it was to even climb up in this truck. There's not a ton of variance in Trump's stump speech when he sticks to it. In every state, he adds a little bit of a flourish. This has been a longer speech. He has gone off prompter more than otherwise. You have to kind of forget the things you know about normal campaigns covering Trump. I mean, you talked about how the campaigns like to stick to the talking point in the end of the race. For Trump, it's pushing one sort of scandal or one distracting story down by adding another one, right? It was a week ago we were talking about Arnold Palmer. It wasn't long after that we were talking about John Kelly, then this Puerto Rico situation. All of those stories have had a shelf life of like 36 hours, so we'll see how long the Trump folks can keep this garbage story in the headlines until something else pushes it away.
I just want to know what we're going to do for Halloween tomorrow.
I imagine we'll see a lot of folks dressed up in reflective vests tomorrow. Trump has 3 events, including one in Las Vegas, so I imagine people will get pretty creative.
Well, maybe I'll wear a tie and be Garrett Haake. Garrett Haake, thank you so much, brother.
Look forward to that. All right, see you, man.
And as we mentioned, Vice President Kamala Harris is crisscrossing the country, too. In traditional modes of transportation, the campaign holding rallies in North Carolina and Pennsylvania earlier in the day. She is expected to end her day in Wisconsin, where she's going to be taking the stage in the next half hour or so. Harris is making the case for a new chapter in her speeches today. Take a listen.
In this election, to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump, who has been trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. Elected on day one, Donald Trump would walk into that office with an enemies list. When I am elected, I will walk in with a to-do list.
Let's bring in NBC's Shaquille Brewster from Madison, Wisconsin tonight. Shaquille, I don't know if you've had a chance to look behind you and peer over people's shoulders to see if they're starting to share the images of Donald Trump in a garbage truck, but lots of damage control going on today, right?
Well, that's definitely the case. And you ask if people are looking at their phones to see that image of Donald Trump in a garbage truck. I'll tell you, a lot of people have focused on the person on stage right now, or the band that's on stage right now, Gracie Abrams. This is billed as a concert and a rally for Vice President Kamala Harris. You could probably hear the music behind me, and you hear the screaming people. That is their attention right now. But I'll tell you, that garbage truck or garbage quote from President Biden yesterday, that has undercut Vice President Harris's messaging since her speech last night. Look, that was supposed to be the attention and the focus, and she's supposed to be riding that wave of momentum today from her speech yesterday. But instead, one of the first questions that she was asked before she got on Air Force Two was her response to what President Biden had to say. It's something that if you watch any of the stories recapping her speech yesterday, or if you watch the news throughout the day, it was something that her campaign was still being asked, something that she still had to clarify. So it definitely did its job in undercutting that message, but you know the campaign is doing what they can to keep the focus on their message. And here in Madison right now, that's about turning out voters, specifically young voters, and those low or non-traditional voters, as the campaign calls them, Gadi.
All of a sudden, your reporting is sounding a little bit like lyrics with the music behind you, Shaq. I do want to ask, though, what is the administration saying Biden was trying to say? Was the clarification today as clear as they want it to be?
It depends on who you are, really, Gadi. And I'll tell you, I talked to some people here in this building, people who are going to be voting for Vice President Kamala Harris, and their message was that this was him misspeaking. He walked it back. He clarified it's much ado about nothing. If you look at that graphic on your screen right now, it really goes to where that apostrophe is, or whether or not an apostrophe exists in that statement, where President Biden said the only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. The White House is trying to say that he was talking about the comedian who on Sunday at Madison Square Garden said that Puerto Rico essentially was an island of garbage. However, the Trump campaign is saying that no, President Biden was talking about all Trump supporters, and that is where the distinction lies. Obviously, Republicans not giving up any inch in this. They're saying that this is the Democrats talking about and condemning all Trump supporters. The Biden campaign, or the Biden administration and the Harris campaign, saying that President Biden clarified immediately those remarks in a way that you did not hear President Trump, former President Trump, condemn the comments that were made on the stage at Madison Square Garden, Gadi.
And as you pointed out, while all this is going on, there's a whole lot of people there not paying attention to any of this and just vibing out to the music. Shaq Brewster, thanks so much, man. And the Trump campaign is alleging there has already been election cheating in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, but so far they haven't produced any evidence. And NBC News anchor Hallie Jackson has that report.
That's really deceiving. Videos like these of long lines in Bucks County amplified by the Trump camp alleging something nefarious.
The Trump-Vance campaign has just filed a huge lawsuit against Bucks County for turning away our voters.
But in reality, Bucks County says they were trying to stick with business hours and miscommunicated that plan to some people waiting to submit mail ballots. Now, after a court order, they'll be open through Friday. Then there's this allegation.
They've already started cheating in Lancaster. They've cheated. We caught them with 2,600 votes. And every vote was written by the same person. I wonder how that happened.
They weren't votes. They were hundreds of fraudulent registration applications. And officials also wonder how it happened, which is why they've rejected those applications submitted by paid canvassers and are investigating. It's exactly how the system is supposed to work. Safeguards kicking in to prevent any cheating, not accelerate it.
When you have cases like this, it should encourage people to have more faith in the system, not less.
It comes as former President Trump and his team are ramping up attacks on the election, despite no evidence of widespread fraud, framing processes that seem standard as suspicious and potentially planting the seed now to dispute the results later.
There is certainly a strategy right now to cast doubt on the results of the election before the votes have been cast.
It's an echo of the former president's election fraud lies in 2016 and in 2020 when his allies lost dozens of court challenges. The Pennsylvania governor today says the state will again have a free and fair, safe and secure election.
Hallie Jackson, thank you. And every election cycle, the economy is front and center. And today, you would think new numbers paint a semi-rosy picture. This GDP grew 2.8% in the third quarter of the year. That is less than expectations, but still pretty solid. But does it match the vibe? NBC senior business correspondent Christine Romans breaks it all down for us.
All right, Gadi, let's start with GDP, gross domestic product. It's the biggest, measure for the size and the strength of the American economy. And 2.8% is a decent number, a little lighter than the 3% many people had expected. But they have these high expectations because this economy keeps outperforming what they were thinking. I mean, if you look at it in the long term, it's basically a 2-year winning streak for the American economy, and driven a lot by consumers who say they feel lousy about the economy, but then they do keep spending. They feel lousy about price points, but they do keep spending, and their wages have been outpacing inflation now for more than a year and a half. So they have a little bit more money to spend, and they are spending it and complaining bitterly about it along the way. I mean, I think the disconnect in the economy right now is that basically, the pain of inflation, the wounds of inflation are deep, and they're still pretty fresh. And people just don't like looking at grocery prices or homeowners insurance or car insurance or housing costs that are so high, and they just continue to feel that. However, I will say there was another number this week that was pretty telling, a consumer confidence number that was up 11%, you know, the biggest jump in something like 3 years. And so that's showing that people are feeling better about the job market. They're noticing the stock market as kind of, you know, a wind at their back. And even if you have a house, you're feeling pretty house rich at the moment. If you don't have a house, you're feeling house poor. And if you recently bought a house, you're feeling really house poor. You know, like a lot of people are just really way out of the skis on the housing front. So that's the disconnect. The top line numbers, Gadi, look really, really good. But there are these pain points for American families, I think, that is why they keep saying that they feel so lousy about the economy. Back to you.
Such a perfect picture of the disconnect. Christine Romans, thank you. Now, today, the Agriculture Department announced they found the first ever case of bird flu in a pig. And they're saying there's no need to panic just yet. Your bacon is safe. But the pig lives on a farm in Oregon, and the test results are pending for 2 other pigs there. Officials say the infected pig is doing fine, not showing any symptoms, but it comes as bird flu is still rapidly spreading in dairy cows across the country. And now there's even more questions and concerns about potential risks to humans. So joining us now is Dr. Akshay Sahayal, the guy that I call every single time I have a medical question. Dr. Sahayal, so we're starting to see this jump from animal to animal to animal. Is there a chance that it could mutate and we can start to see it spread through humans?
It's a great question. So the background and why there's been a lot of excitement today about the case in the pigs. So Gadi, pigs can be seen as a sort of melting pot or mixing pot between human viruses and bird viruses. And what happens is, and the problem becomes, if they get infected with both at the same time, they can take parts of that human virus, parts of that bird virus, and sort of mix them together and create this strain that we don't really see before. And that's really what people are worried about. If this should be in more pigs, will that eventually happen? Will the pig be infected by both the human and the bird version and come up with a sort of mutant or a mixture of the viruses? So that's really the background about why people are concerned. But, the point that you just brought up in the intro there was really important. This was not a commercial farm. This isn't something that's going to affect the bacon supply, as you pointed out. It's not something that people really need to panic about. But, government officials, health experts, it is something they're going to be watching closely.
Now, we heard, it sounds like that pig is asymptomatic, you'd call it, right? Are symptoms the same with animals and humans? Does this manifest itself in the same way that we feel it?
Yeah, so the pig was asymptomatic, Gadi. The pig was tested actually out of an abundance of caution, meaning that they wanted to see if there was any spread on the farm. But the symptoms can be pretty similar. It's what we would call flu-like symptoms, right? Body aches, chills. You can get redness of the eyes. That tends to be a common one we're seeing. But Gadi, I think the most interesting thing here that we're all talking about, traditionally we talk about bird flu having a mortality rate of 50%, and that's why there's a lot of panic about this. We've had about 37 cases now here in the U.S. Most of them are mild. So is that mortality rate something that is going to need to be studied? Is that really an accurate rate, or is it something we're going to learn more about going forward?
Mortality rate, is there cause for concern here? Should we be stressing out about this?
It is not something that people walking around, here in Los Angeles, in New York, and anywhere in the country really need to be concerned about for the consumer. But public health officials, people who are in the business, people who have livestock or farm owners, it is something that they need to take a little bit more seriously. I talked to Rick Bright, who's the former head of BARDA, the sort of government offices that helps manage the pandemics, and he was just alarmed at the lack of testing. And he sort of drew an analogy to COVID. When COVID first came, remember the lack of tests? We couldn't get a test, and the virus was really spreading undetected. Well, we're making the same mistakes here. We really don't have a good sense of how much livestock is infected. And so for the layperson, I don't think there's much cause for concern right now. But for public health officials, those who are in the industry, they should be a little bit more alarmed.
A lack of testing, and yet some of this came from a non-commercial farm, right? Just a family farm. Are they starting to ramp up that testing?
They are, and there's actually Quest Diagnostics, who's a lab you may know if you get blood work done.
I know them well from COVID.
Yeah, so they're actually developing a bird flu test. So patients if a patient comes to me with symptoms in the future, I'm able to actually swab them for this. So that we are working on it. It is taking a little bit longer than most people would have liked, but it is coming.
Got it, Dr. Akshay, thank you so much.
Anytime.
And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, $1 million cheating scandal in Texas, not at the hands of students, but hundreds of unqualified teachers, how they were able to pull off the alleged plot and make their way into classrooms across the state. Plus, devastation in Spain after torrential rain triggered deadly flash floods, making it the worst natural disaster to hit that country in recent memories. More on the aftermath just ahead. And later this hour, in the future of everything, we are talking election cybersecurity, and NBC's Tom Costello is going to get an inside look at how the federal government is keeping track of any cyber threats that could attempt to interfere with this election.
Do you see any sign of a successful foreign attempt to hack into any bit of the election mechanics in the country?
No, and in my view, that would not be possible.
Hey, welcome back. Here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. A Florida teen has been arrested after pulling out a machete outside of a polling station. He was one of 8 people accused of intimidating Democratic voters in Neptune Beach. Police say the group was there for no other reason but to cause a disturbance. The U.S. Supreme Court is upholding Virginia's purge of voter registrations, around 1,600 of them. Now, that move is aimed at preventing non-citizens from voting, but critics argue that the sweep has removed U.S. citizens from the rolls as well. The state says same-day registration allows anyone who might have been affected to cast a provisional ballot. And E. coli cases linked to McDonald's Quarter Pounders keep climbing. The CDC is saying tonight 90 people have gotten sick across 13 states, with 1 death reported in Colorado. The CDC and FDA think onions from a supplier are still the likely source of the outbreak. And a former Disney employee is accused of hacking a menu-making system used at their restaurants and changing details about allergens. He allegedly made menus display items containing peanuts that were safe for people with peanut allergies. Disney fortunately caught the errors before anyone saw the menus. The suspect's lawyer denies any intent to harm. And New Jersey's largest newspaper, the Star-Ledger, will print its final edition in February. After that, the paper will go fully digital, and the Star-Ledger was once the top 12, or one of the top 12 circulated papers in the United States. The paper's owner says the decision was based on rising costs and reduced demand for print, but adds it will allow for greater investment in journalism. And a Kentucky jury now holds the fate of Brett Hinson in their hands, one of the police officers connected to the death of Breonna Taylor. Now, here's some video of him arriving at court today ahead of closing arguments. He's facing 2 federal felony charges over deprivation of civil rights during the March 2020 raid. You'll remember the shooting was one of the sparks that set off mass protests against police brutality 4 years ago. A phrase we often heard: arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor. If convicted, Hinson could spend the rest of his life in prison, but the prosecution has a tall order in getting a guilty verdict. Last year, there was a mistrial after a jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision over these very charges. Let's bring in NBC News correspondent Mara Barrett. Mara, can you break down the specific charges here? This is not about whether he killed Breonna Taylor, right?
No, Gadi, it's not about that, considering there was so many gunfire going on from multiple officers at that time. The real question is around civil rights. And so the charges that he's facing is 2 charges of deprivation of civil rights, both in Breonna Taylor's case, but also in the apartment next door with a couple and a child that were living. Because of some of the rounds that Hinson fired, some of them went into their apartment as well. And so ultimately, in their closing arguments, we heard today the defense and the prosecution bringing up that question of civil rights and whether or not violating department policy also means that he could have violated the Constitution by entering these apartments without proper notification. And so that's kind of the central point of this trial, Gadi.
I got it. And for the prosecution, what did those closing arguments look like?
So the prosecution centered their closing arguments today on the fact that Hinson made an assumption, made a guess, and they said that no officer, nobody at all should ever make a guess when it comes to innocent lives. They said that he did not have target ID, he did not see a physical person that when he fired off those shots, and Hinson had testified during the trial that he thought he was protecting one of his fellow officers who he believed to have been shot at. He thought he was being executed, was the direct quote that he used. And so at the end of the day, that's where he stood on that. And the defense basically tried to poke holes by going back to that central question of civil rights. They wanted to focus on the question of whether or not Breonna Taylor was alive when all of those shots were going off. And their argument is that if she wasn't alive, there weren't any civil rights to be violated. So obviously a very sensitive topic to discuss here. And so those are the things that the jury is now deliberating over after both sides gave their closing arguments today.
And again, the first trial resulted in a mistrial. So what did prosecutors do differently this time to try to get a different result?
So prosecutors definitely honed in on a few more details, brought in some new evidence to really try to ensure a verdict this time. They focused on some of Hinson's some past citations he had gotten as an officer for violating other policies, and they really honed in on the fact that they called into question of his decision to fire his weapon at all. They said that it wasn't a rookie mistake because he was no longer a rookie. He'd been in the department for 20 years. And so that's something that we heard very explicitly throughout the course of this second trial. I'll note that last year, during the jury deliberations, they went over their decision for about 3 days, were deadlocked. The judge pushed them to try to make a decision. They couldn't. And so that's why we're here now. The jury went into deliberation earlier this afternoon, and court closed for the day. So they are home, and they will resume their deliberations tomorrow. Gadi.
Important case to keep an eye on. Thanks so much, Maura. And Karen Reed is back in the headlines with her retrial months away. She's speaking out in an exclusive interview with Vanity Fair, sharing new revelations about her relationship with the boyfriend she is accused of murdering. Reed's first trial ended in a mistrial for the death of her police officer boyfriend. Her lawyers are set to appear in court next week to argue that the 2 of the 3 charges against her should be thrown out. Right now, the new trial date is set for January, and through it all, Reed maintains she is innocent. NBC's Rahima Ellis has the latest.
Karen Reed, the Massachusetts woman at the center of the high-profile trial in which she was accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend, now opening up about her experience in a major 2-part series in Vanity Fair, telling the magazine she feels violated by the very intrusive and public investigation that has thrown her private life out into the open. Crowds showed up outside court, both in support.
Distance, no problem for some of the more die-hard Karen Reed supporters.
And to see her downfall.
How does it feel to be known as a cop killer, Karen?
It ended in a mistrial after the jury deadlocked. She now faces a new trial next year.
If you wondered what corruption looks like, that's what corruption looks like.
Her defense saying during the trial that she was framed, pointing to alleged misconduct during the investigation, like derogatory text messages sent by officers. Multiple officers have faced discipline surrounding the case. Reed in Vanity Fair now responding to the parents of her late boyfriend, John O'Keefe, who have repeatedly said they think Reed is guilty, saying, quote, "If you think I killed John, that means you misjudged me for 2 years and entrusted 2 young family members in my care. Then, in the blink of an eye, you now think I'm a cold-blooded killer who took away your son." And of O'Keefe's 2 adopted children whom she co-parented while they were dating, saying, quote, "They've been exploited and brought into a trial they had no business being in." It all started on January 29th, 2022, the morning after Reed dropped off O'Keefe at the house of another Boston police officer for a party late at night. She claims she awoke that morning, panicked when John wasn't home, then drove to the last place she had seen him. There on the snowy front lawn was O'Keefe, battered and bloody. After he was pronounced dead, Reed became the prime suspect. Prosecutors saying she rammed him with her car out of anger.
I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him. Those are the words of the defendant.
Charges she strongly denies. Reed opening up about their relationship in Vanity Fair, quote, "We argued, but was I abusive? Was I neglectful? Did I mistreat him emotionally or in any way? Or did we have our ups and downs?" Now, as the case heads back to court, questions swirling around whether the jurors actually found Reed innocent of 2 of the 3 charges instead of being deadlocked, something the defense is now arguing in a motion. Arguments in front of a judge next month over whether she needs to defend herself on those 2 charges all over again.
Rahima Ellis reporting for us tonight. Now to Houston, where hundreds of teachers are accused of paying bribes to pass important certification tests. 5 people have been arrested so far, and police say they made more than $1 million. Here's NBC's Stephen Romo.
It's crazy.
Parents and students in Houston stunned to learn some of their educators are accused of running $1 million fraud ring.
Gotta be careful of people.
In my class, everyone was gathered up, reading it off one phone.
Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg announcing this week that 5 people, including 2 assistant principals, have been charged in an alleged scheme that let hundreds of people cheat on their state certification tests.
This was used to certify more than 200 unqualified teachers, all now practicing or having practiced here in our Texas public schools.
A respected high school basketball coach, Vincent Grayson, is the alleged ringleader. Prosecutors say it worked like this. People struggling to pass certification tests would pay Grayson or the others allegedly involved $2,500. Up to $500 of that was used to bribe officials at the testing center. Then on testing day, the candidate would sign in and show an ID as usual, but then leave, allowing assistant principal Nicholas Newton to take their place and ace that test. Prosecutors say since 2020, more than 400 fraudulent exams were taken on behalf of 200 teachers, while the scheme raked in thousands for those involved. Grayson, Newton, and 3 others have been charged with 2 felony counts each of engaging in criminal activity, according to the district attorney. NBC News has not been able to reach attorneys for Grayson or Newton. An attorney for LaShonda Roberts, accused of personally funneling at least 90 teachers into the scheme, says the accusations are, quote, unsubstantiated claims and that the truth will come to light. But the scheme authorities call a pay-to-pass scam potentially put kids in real danger.
The cheating teachers include at least 2 sexual predators who, once falsely certified, had access through their employment to underage kids on campus and off. One has been charged with indecency with a child, another with online solicitation.
But amid such a deep breach of trust, it was ultimately a Good Samaritan who cracked this case open for authorities.
A former coach applying as a police officer in a different part of Texas had an attack of conscience and came forward with a scheme that was apparently well known among teacher applicants wanting to be certified, and busted this phony test-taking scheme right out of the water.
Right out of the water. Stephen Romo, thank you. And still ahead, will it be a comeback story at the World Series? The Yankees are not letting the Dodgers take home the title without a fight. Sam Brock is going to join us from Yankee Stadium as Game 5 is underway tonight. But first, you got to see this. An orthodontist in Long Island clearly takes Halloween very seriously. This year, Dr. Scott Matter and his staff decorated the office dressed up as characters from Tim Burton's classic Beetlejuice. Patients didn't just come in for an appointment, they came in for an experience. They went from the afterlife's waiting room to the attic to the graveyard and finally to Dr. Beetlejuice's chair, where he warned patients, brush your teeth better than he does. And they didn't even have to say his name 3 times. Yikes. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back. Senior Biden officials are traveling to Israel tomorrow to speak with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and they're talking about a possibility of a ceasefire deal in Lebanon. Whether Hezbollah would agree to one is still up in the air, but so far, nearly 3,000 people have died in Lebanon from the fighting there. And NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley has more.
Well, American diplomatic efforts are continuing after those meetings in Doha earlier this week, trying to resolve the crisis in the Gaza Strip. Now we're seeing American diplomats focusing this time on the crisis here in Lebanon over Israel's northern border, We're hearing that 2 top-level American diplomats, envoys of the Biden administration, are going to be sent to Israel tomorrow, where they're going to be negotiating, or at least speaking with the Israelis about plans to impose some kind of ceasefire over the border between Israel and Lebanon, where Israel has expanded over the past just about 6 weeks its attacks against Hezbollah and another Iran-backed militant group like Hamas. But this time Hezbollah is based here in Lebanon. Now, we've been seeing Israel has been attacking points throughout Lebanon and caused a massive exodus of internally displaced people, numbering well more than 1 million, according to the Lebanese government. About 1.2 to 1.3 million people from all across the country. So that is a desperate situation that needs to be resolved, but we don't know whether any progress is going to be made. We've heard from now just Naim Qassem, the newly elected head of Hezbollah. We don't know where he is. A lot of rumors say that he's in Iran. He could be possibly here in Lebanon, but he said in his first comments since he was elected head of Hezbollah that he will continue the fight against the Israelis. But it sounds like from what we're hearing from various diplomats that there is a very earnest effort to try to get Hezbollah to separate their cause from that in the Gaza Strip. They had been saying earlier that they are going to continue to pummel the Israelis as long as the Israelis continue to attack the Gaza Strip. It seems there has been some tentative progress on separating those 2 fronts. Whether or not that's going to end in some sort of ceasefire here in Lebanon between Hezbollah and Israel, that could take weeks or months.
Matt Bradley, thank you. And in Spain, at least 95 people are dead and many more are missing after some torrential rains caused flash flooding in the southern and eastern part of the country. That's according to the country's emergency services. And they're now calling it Spain's worst natural disaster in 30 years. NBC's Keir Simmons has more on all of it.
Tonight, Spain hammered by catastrophic flash flooding that carried whole cars away in its deadly currents. This woman and her dog, initially struggling in the water, then saved. One of many dramatic helicopter rescues. Here, a child. Drivers trapped by a year's rainfall in just 8 hours. The aftermath like a pile-up on the freeway and in southern eastern Spain's narrow streets. At least 95 people have died. Tonight it's unclear how many are missing. One witness saying a house at the entrance of the town just disappeared. Look how we have torn our clothes because we were saving dogs, says another. Climate change is causing more extreme rainfall events, while Valencia has a history of sudden floods. More than 1,000 troops have been deployed amid criticism the local government was not prepared. The Prime Minister declaring the whole of Spain is crying with you and promising we won't abandon you. Many homes are rubble, the King calling it enormous destruction. In Spain, they're calling it the storm of the century, and there's more rain coming.
More rain coming. Keir Simmons, thank you. And Project 2025 and climate change. The controversial plan wants to remove all mention of climate change from the federal government. So we're going to take a deeper dive at what that could mean just ahead. So stay tuned. And welcome back. Tonight is the final game of the baseball season at Yankee Stadium in New York. The question is, are the Yanks and Dodgers packing up afterwards to head back here to the West, or will L.A. be celebrating a championship? The Yankees won Game 4 to keep the series going, but this is the moment that is getting all the buzz. 2 fans trying to take the game into their own hands, literally attempting to grab that ball out of Dodgers star outfielder Mookie Betts' gloves, like putting the Yankees, I guess. The fans were ejected from the game, but told one reporter they had tickets for tonight. And after a bunch of back and forth, the Yankees announced, nope, they are no longer welcome at all. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins us once again from outside of the stadium. Howdy, Sam. There's rowdy, and then there's like prying a ball out of clenched, gloved hands. What's the word there in the Bronx about this?
I would say that's typical New York, but certainly, Gadi, look, there's virtually universal condemnation from fans that I'm talking to out here that say that's definitely crossed the line, because the reality is, in terms of how this works for rules, a player has domain over the fields of play. If you're a fan and you're sitting in the stands and the ball comes into the stands. Different scenario there, but that's not what happened with Mookie Betts, MVP and outfielder for the Los Angeles Dodgers. He jumped up, caught the ball in bounds, or at least he was in foul play, but he fell in the field of play into the stands. That's when you saw those two guys, one grab his wrist and the other hold his glove, open it up as you described, take the ball out and just fling it. Mookie was just hanging there suspended, Gadi. His arm was vulnerable. It was tense. Clearly, he could have gotten injured. Thankfully, he did not. But Major League Baseball and the New York Yankees both said that is unacceptable. It's egregious. Those are the words they used in their press release. And they said there is a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to this kind of thing. And as a result of that, they are banned. Not just them, the two guys involved for this game, but also apparently their friends and family members, because we were texting with them, and they said, I can't believe I expected to be banned, but the Yankees won't even accept my younger brother and his friends either. They can't use the tickets, so no one from that family's going in. I did have conversations with people around Yankee Stadium tonight to get their take on what they thought about that decision. Here's what they said.
That's sort of beyond sort of what, fans are entitled to do when they're at the stadium. You can be loud, you can be vocal, you can sort of boo players, but at the same time, there's like lines that shouldn't be crossed. And I think everybody would kind of acknowledge that they crossed the line.
My initial reaction was I loved it. I'm not going to lie. We needed a little bit of fire. I get it. You don't want to do that. These guys get paid a lot of money. A little bit of an insult, but I loved it in the moment. Second thoughts, maybe don't do that.
Yeah, I think that response really does sort of encapsulate it, right? Initially, you're fired up. It's in the moment. Yeah, he can't get that out. We're going to keep this at bat alive. And then the guy says, well, I thought about it. And yeah, that wasn't cool. I think that sort of really does speak to a lot of people here. Upon further review, not a good idea. The one hanging question right now, Gadi, is whether or not these guys will be invited back next year. One of them, at least, is a season ticket holder. Will he have his rights to re-enter Yankee Stadium? That remains an open-ended question. Gadi?
I mean, unprofessional, unacceptable, egregious. I think your words were crossing the line. It's funny that you say crossing the line, because I totally agree. But it reminds me of this other sports moment that I recall from this summer. I don't know if we have that video of just egregious violence during a sporting event. There's Sam Brock towering over the competitor there, and then the smaller guy gets thrown into a headlock, almost slammed to the ground. I mean, Sam, it's so ironic that you're here talking about unsportsmanlike conduct when, like, this physical violence that we see on the screen here is just, I believe, pretty egregious. What do you think?
I feel like you used that video. I actually don't even have a screen right now, but I obviously know exactly what you're talking about from the correspondent Olympics in Paris. I think you used that video to set up a self-glorification. That's fine. Let's go that road. So obviously you and I, Gadi, were involved in a foot race. It appeared to me at the time that you were a step or two in front of me because you thought I was going to catch you, and I hadn't caught you, and you stopped and slowed down so that I could actually win the race, and we could continue 1-1 into the final event. That did not sit well with me because that's the antithesis of sportsmanship, in my opinion. So I clearly had to put you in a headlock and sort of, get this whole thing squared away. It's all in good fun, right, buddy?
I am a mere 6 foot. You were a towering 6'15". A headlock at that point, totally uncalled for. Sam, so good to see you at the game. Good luck tonight, brother.
Thank you, buddy. Always a pleasure, Gadi. Thank you.
And in tonight's temperature check, the election's potential impact on how the government could decide to act on climate change. You might have heard of Project 2025. It's this long blueprint put out by the conservative group, the Heritage Foundation, on what they want a Republican-led government to do. And their plans call for the removal of climate change solutions and widespread deregulation. Now, it's important to note that former President Donald Trump says he has nothing to do with Project 2025, and it's not the Republican platform, but the proposals have a lot of people in the science community extremely nervous. Here's NBC's Chase Kane.
Covering more than 900 pages, Project 2025 is nearly 2 reams of paper. And its proposals for climate change essentially call for 2 things: stop researching it and stop talking about it. But global scientific consensus agrees climate change is largely driven by humans burning fossil fuels. But Project 2025 denies that.
Eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere.
And in training videos obtained by ProPublica, presents a blatant lie to justify reversing climate action.
Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you?
When we reached out to the think tank behind Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, a spokesperson said anyone can read the document to see what we actually call for. And when you do, you'll read about major cuts and changes to the EPA, FEMA, the National Weather Service, even proposing that NOAA should be dismantled and many of its functions eliminated.
It's so bizarre, right? I mean, how many Americans are sitting around their kitchen table right now with their family looking over bills and the cost of living and thinking to themselves, what are we going to do about NOAA and the Weather Service? I mean, literally, I can think about 99 problems and NOAA ain't one of them.
Project 2025 has sweeping plans for NOAA agencies to fully commercialize the National Weather Service, sideline the National Climate Assessment, and says NOAA's climate change research should be disbanded, even though that research helps improve forecasts and keep Americans safe.
That's why everybody gets up each and every day to come in here and do their research so that the public have the knowledge, the understanding, the information to make decisions that are critical for them and their families.
But I am concerned that they don't want to support any of the research that goes into why are these storms getting worse, because they don't like the answer, because it's an inconvenient answer if you are wanting to support fossil fuels.
Craig Fugate led FEMA under President Obama, and climate change aside, he says Project 2025 could decimate communities impacted by disasters by slashing federal aid to just 25% of the total damage.
It almost becomes unthinkable that states would ever be able to recover without long, costly recovery periods that would come out of state and local budgets.
During September's debate, I don't want to read it, former President Trump distanced himself from the plan, despite it being largely written by former officials from his administration. His campaign told us that only the president and not any other organization or former staff represent policies for the second term. However, Mr. Trump nodded to Project 2025 in a 2022 speech to the Heritage Foundation, the group that wrote it.
This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do. And
even in the Trump administration, their climate report pointed out these were the things we were already seeing, and they were increasing: extreme heat and extreme rainfall events. So just because you don't like the answer doesn't mean the information isn't important. You know, how do we prepare ourselves if we ignore what is coming?
Well, let's bring in Chase Kane for more on this. So, Chase, organizations like NOAA seem pretty essential for everyday Americans. Why are there calls to cut back on something like NOAA?
I mean, they're just calling NOAA a climate alarmist organization. I mean, they're really going after NOAA, it seems, because of their climate change research. But, you know, there's broad scientific consensus. As we mentioned in this story, the climate change is very real. It is a threat. I mean, Americans are feeling the consequences of it all across the country. We just had two powerful back-to-back hurricanes. We have wildfires and heat waves. I mean, the consequences are here. And so going after their climate science, I mean, plenty of experts say that's a bad thing to do, a dangerous thing to do.
And like we've mentioned, former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but he also had one term in office so far. So is there anything that we can glean about what his policies will look like from that first term?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need a lot of imagination to think about what a second term would look like. I mean, even in the debate, he was saying, you know, drill, baby, drill, or in one of his rallies. I mean, that's a refrain that he uses. He also famously pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement. I mean, that was a big international thing. He also weakened the Endangered Species Act, weakened fuel economy standards for cars and trucks. He scaled back protections of the Clean Water and the Clean Air Act. I mean, some tallies say that he either weakened or repealed more than 200 different environmental regulations in one term. So we can only imagine what a second term would mean, Gadi.
Thanks for that history. Chase Kane, thank you.
Of course.
And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. Protecting the election from cyber threats has never been more important than this election cycle. And we're going to have a look at how one federal agency is working around the clock to keep potential threats at bay with the election just days away. And in tonight's Future of Everything, potential cyber threats to the election. But first, SpaceX continues its Starlink campaign, launching 23 satellites into orbit just a few hours ago. Take a look.
3, 2, 1, ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Starlink.
All right, so here's the thing. That was the second of 2 SpaceX launches today. The first out of California, the second one out of Florida. 43 new satellites going up in all. The company is nearing the 400th launch of its Starlink mission to provide global internet coverage. You see some of it right there. Since its first launch in 2019, it now has over 6,000 satellites orbiting Earth, and that is just a fraction of their goal of more than 30,000 in the near future. Not everyone's happy about this. In a letter to the FCC, more than 100 researchers have called for the mission to be put on pause, saying that the environmental harms of launching these satellites is unclear. They're citing a 2022 report that claims the FCC is sidestepping an environmental review of the effect of all these satellites. SpaceX and the FCC have not responded to requests for comment. And finally tonight, we are in the home stretch to Election Day, in which is 6 days to go. There are growing concerns about security. In Colorado, the Secretary of State there accidentally released the passwords to most of the state's voting machines. They say that flub isn't going to impact the voting there because of a multi-step security process. But this comes as U.S. cyber officials are on high alert for threats overseas as well as here at home. And NBC senior correspondent Tom Costello has a look at how officials are preparing for the big day.
So, Tom, this is our secure floor.
All cybersecurity.
So cybersecurity and physical security of critical infrastructure.
It's in this room that America's Director of Cyber and Infrastructure Security, CISA, says the nation's shields are up, with U.S. adversaries targeting the elections.
What we are seeing are Russia, Iran, China conducting influence operations, disinformation operations, focused on 2 goals: to undermine American confidence in the legitimacy of our elections and to stoke partisan discord.
Last week, Pennsylvania election officials quickly labeled this video a fake, which depicted somebody allegedly ripping up ballots for Donald Trump.
FBI, the intelligence community, and CISA came out affirming that it was a fake Russian video. Look, we are going to see more of this.
Ahead of the elections, CISA has now role-played 200 response scenarios with all 50 states, from ransomware attacks to deep fake videos to bombings.
There's a lot to keep track of. Nationwide, 132,000 polling places, 775,000 poll workers. It's here that they watch for any signs of cyber or physical interference. Do you see any sign of a successful foreign attempt to hack into any bit of the election mechanics in the country?
No, and in my view, that would not be possible.
Not possible because every state runs their own elections. There is no single point of vulnerability. Voting machines are not connected to the internet. 97% use paper ballots, and every state has added layers of security since 2020.
Was there one big takeaway, one big lesson learned from the 2020 election that you're applying this year?
Well, at the end of the day, what we learned from 2020 is that a lot of the work that had been done to ensure that the election was secure, that direction was the right direction to go in. And what we've done from 2020 is we have doubled and tripled down.
But the threat's doubled and tripled.
It has doubled and tripled down, exactly. I think the greatest threat is this fire hose of disinformation. It's corrosive to our democracy. It does the work of our foreign adversaries for them. And oh, by the way, it's creating very real physical threats to election workers and election officials and their families.
Foreign and domestic disinformation turning Americans against each other. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
What a patchwork of security, Tom. Thank you. That's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.